Alright, so this is turn 6, which is the 4 p.m. turn. The Allies retained the initiative. They did have a reinforcement that's coming in at 5 p.m. They rolled for early arrival, but it did not arrive early, so it'll come in at 5. And what we've got going on here is fairly limited. They're going to continue to withdraw in the Bossau Woods. They're going to continue to move the Brunswickers over to back up the Bossau Woods. They have declared a charge with their Dutch-Belgian cavalry that's going to try to take out that gun on the road and maybe hit the line infantry that's there as well. And the main body, the division that's deployed in the crossroads, is going to hold position for right now. All right, so I'll go ahead and set up after their movement, and we'll see how things look. All right, so here's the position after the Allied move. Over on their right flank, they got a horrible command roll and were unable to swap out the 2 brigades of infantry that are deployed in the Bossau Woods, although they were able to put their 2nd Brigade into line. The cavalry charge in the center by the 2 brigades of Dutch-Belgian cavalry, that was successful. The French had a chance to form square, but they rolled a 9 and failed to form square, so they'll have to meet the charge in line formation. In the center, they held position, and only their batteries are going to fire here. As for the French, their 2 guns on the right will fire defensive fire first. Obviously, there'll be defensive fire with the line infantry that's being hit by the cav. And, of course, there's going to be an exchange of fire between one stand of light infantry in the woods and the Nassau troops that are in there as well. So I'll go ahead and give you some close-ups and show you what went on. So the French are firing defensive fire first. Their 2 batteries here in the center are going to target that 1 battery over there. They have a chance 4 of a successful hit, and they rolled a hit on it, so that inflicts a casualty, and it forces the battery to withdraw. So it goes back behind the town. That also means it won't get to shoot during the offensive fire phase. Over here, the infantry have 4 points firing, but because they tried to form square and failed, they only get to fire 2. That's a chance 1 against each one of those brigades. Both of them miss. And over here they have a single stand of skirmishers. They're going to fire at the line infantry in the woods. Their chance 2, it actually hits, which gives a 3rd casualty on that unit. It can only take 1 more. I'm not going to remove the stand, though. I just know that that stand is no longer effective. When it fires its return fire, it only has 1 point going back, and it misses. We'll do the cavalry charge later. Coming over here, this 1 battery of artillery is going to fire at this column right here. It's at effective range. It has a chance 6. It hits, which gives it its 2nd casualty. And when it rolls its morale, the 2nd casualty changes its morale down and it goes yellow. So it has taken some damage. Alright, so that pretty much finishes all of the fire that's going on here. The last thing that's going to happen is this charge here with the cavalry. Alright, so the last thing to resolve is the cavalry charge. The infantry normally would have 4 points of firepower, but because they failed to form square, they tried and failed. That firepower is halved to 2. It goes 1 point against each of the stands, and both fail. There's no incoming fire from the cavalry, obviously, so we're going to go straight to the melee resolution. First of all, the melee potential of the 2 cavalry brigades. Each brigade is worth 9 points, 9 points per stand. That's 18 points total. 1 chance 8 kills 2. I've gone ahead and marked them off already. The return by the infantry is 6 points. It goes to 3 points against each one of them. And they miss on 1 of the units, but they do roll a 3 on the 2nd, so we mark a casualty on that one. So that it's going to come down to morale. So the first thing that happens, you figure out the infantry. They are line infantry. That's a 7 is their morale status. They've taken 2 casualties, takes them down to 5, and they're outnumbered by 3 to 2 or more. The reason it's 3 to 2 or more is because cavalry stands in a melee are doubled for mass, so which gives them the equivalent of 4 stands against 2 stands of infantry. All right, so what we've got there is a chance 4 for the infantry, and a chance, it's going to be an 8 for one of the cavalry brigades and a 7 for the other. And when they roll their dice, both cavalry brigades survive their rolls, but the infantry fails, which means it takes an additional casualty when it loses the melee. It goes red, and it routes 4 inches to the rear. So we're going to move it back. It's going to end up right back here in the field. All right. Now the cavalry could do a follow-up charge, but they go ahead and decide they're going to hold their position. So that concludes the combat for the French phase. All right. All right, I'd said that was the end of the French move, but actually that's the end of the Allied phase. They had won the initiative and moved first. So now we have the French. Their right flank is going to hold position pretty much. Their left flank is going to execute a couple of charges. First of all, that Cuirassier brigade, which had come up the road last turn, is now going to charge the Dutch-Belgian cavalry. And they are going to stage a charge into the Bassau Woods using some skirmishers that are going to be screening 2 brigades of infantry. And they've got enough command points left over that they can go ahead and try to rally that brigade of infantry that is routed from last turn. So I'll go ahead and make their moves for them, and then we'll take a look. So after the French movement, this is where we stand. Over on the far left, the French were able to rally that infantry brigade that was damaged, so it went from a red status to yellow status, so it's considered shaken, but it wasn't able to move forward. Their charge in the woods did go in, so their skirmishers are screening 2 brigades of infantry, 1 light and 1 line, going into the woods. Over on their right flank, there's nothing going on except for artillery fire, but in the very center you can see that the Cuirassier Brigade was able to execute their charge against the Dutch light cavalry. The Guard cavalry moved up the road as fast as it could, but it wasn't able to get into anything. It wasn't even able to move into a supporting position. So I'll go ahead and dismount the camera, and we'll go ahead and take a look at some close-ups. All right, so over on the French right, the Allied player is firing defensive fire first. So this battery is targeting that square that's been beat up again. So it goes and fire. It has a chance 2, but it's because it's in column formation, it becomes a chance 3. They rolled a 2, so they were able to inflict another casualty. And because they failed their morale test, this unit was actually eliminated. As we move over, we're going to go ahead and fire the offensive fire of these guns now to get it out of the way. So they got 2 guns firing at 1 at effective and 1 at long range. So that's a total of 6 points firing. And they're going to target the Highlanders up here. They roll a 3, which was it means that they were able to make a hit. The Highlanders are supported. So they survived their morale roll without a problem. We're going to go ahead and do the cavalry charge right here first. Notice that I've got the battery turned around. Remember last turn it ran away from the cavalry charge. That means it is considered silence for the rest of the turn. So all it's going to be is a straight up fight between the cav and the heavy and the light cav. The 2 stands of light cavalry have a total of 6 points against other cavalry, and there's a chance 4 for the heavies to go back against the lights. In this case, they have to split their combat. It's a chance 2 against each stand, and they roll badly and miss both of them. This chance 6 against the Cuirassiers is successful, and they inflict a casualty. Now for morale, both of them start out as a morale grade 8. The cavalry, the cuirassiers, have taken a casualty, makes them a 7, and they're outnumbered 3-2 or more, makes them a 5, whereas the cavalry for the Dutch are still an 8 and a 7. Although the one Dutch brigade does break and go back or drops out, the second one survives, and the cuirassiers are defeated, and that eliminates the cuirassiers because when they're broken, they take another casualty and they leave the board. All right, moving on over here, we've got an exchange of fire before the actual thing goes in. There are skirmishers in front of the charging brigades, and they are part of the same division, so they get to screen and protect the charging columns from fire. There's only one stand left on that Nassau brigade, and when it fires, it misses both the skirmishers and the light infantry. The skirmishers fire back along with the 2 lead stands of the columns, which gives them a total of 6 points firing. Halved because they're in the woods is a 3. They fail. So the light infantry fall back behind the units they're skirmishing for. That's both of these. And the 2 brigades will go ahead and move into combat. Now, the combat potential of the guys, the Nassau troops, is only a chance 3 because they are, that's the only stand they've got left. They are defending in the woods, so that affects the attack against them, but it doesn't help them. So their chance 3 has to be split to a 2 and a 1, and both of those, actually the chance 1, I forgot, was successful, so they did inflict a casualty on the light infantry. And coming back, there are 4 stand of troops coming at them. That is a total of 12 points, but they are attacking a defender in the woods, so it's halved, it becomes a 6, but it's a successful attack, and that eliminates the Dutch-Belgian brigade. So they go off the board. The second Dutch-Belgian brigade does have to check for morale, for panic, and it succeeds, so it's fine. Now at this point, we did a couple of morale checks. Leader casualty checks. Anytime units are destroyed, there's a chance of the leader going away. There have been 2 or 3 units on each side broken. As it turns out, both sides rolled a successful leader kill, so the closest leader to each of these fights was destroyed. In this case, it was Slender Billy over here, so he's removed from the board. And in this case, it was the cuirassiers, and they eliminated this guy. He had just gotten on the board, but he's gone now. So both of those guys are gone. All right, so that finishes the combat phase for this turn. We'll go ahead and move on to the next one. All right, so we're starting turn 7, which is the 5 o'clock turn. The French win the initiative and choose to move first. And you can see by the arrows on here that what they're doing in Bossau, they're going to continue to push forward. Although they are planning on trying to reinforce or plug the gap they have in the center now by moving a couple of their brigades over to the right to try to block off that light cavalry that's in the center. The guard cavalry is just going to stand and see what happens. On the right flank, they're just going to continue to try to sidle to the right. What they're trying to do is to block that road, because that road, as it heads to the east, heads to Lanay. So even if they can't take the crossroads, if they can block that road, then they can basically cut communications between the British and the Prussian army, which will do at least part of what the Emperor wanted them to do. So that's what we've got. I'll go ahead and finish their movement, and we'll see what goes on. All right, here's the position after the French movement. On the far left in the Bossau woods, they declared a charge, but it failed to go in. They got a bad command roll. They were able to advance their skirmishers back in front of their columns again. They moved one of their independent line infantry brigades over toward the road, formed square, and backed it up with that damaged line infantry brigade, which can provide support. Their artillery battery is effective again this turn. Now, when the infantry and the artillery battery became effective, it threatened the cavalry with a fire that they could not respond to. That's an initiative roll that they can make to respond. They have two choices in this case. They can either charge or they can withdraw. In this case, because the infantry are already in square and the artillery battery is right there, they've decided that they're going to withdraw instead. So we'll go ahead and do that in just a second. On the right flank, they were able to shift to the right, moving toward the road. They haven't quite got there yet, but they're moving. And they started their cavalry division. They pulled them out from there, crossed the stream, losing an action, and now they're moving around toward the center. So we'll do some close-ups and see how things go. All right, so in the Bossau Woods, the French skirmishers exchanged fire with the Nassau Brigade that's deployed there now. They were able to inflict a casualty. The return fire or the fire by the Nassau did not affect them, so they did take a casualty on the Nassau. Over here in the center, as I said, the Dutch cavalry was able to withdraw as part of their reaction move. So the battery was now firing at long range. It only had a chance 2 to hit it, and it missed. Over here, the British battery fired at the line and missed, and the 2 batteries here fired back at the Highlanders, and they missed. So there was a whole lot of nothing going on today. So that finishes the combat for the French portion of this turn. So now we're going to get into the Allied portion. Alright, so this is the Allied portion of turn 7. They did roll, or they didn't even have to roll. They had a scheduled division coming on board from the west. That's the British 3rd Division. It's coming on this turn. The Brunswickers are going to go ahead and advance, try to get into the Bossau Woods. And the British 5th Division is going to go ahead and try to advance toward the French position. Over in the Bossau Woods, the infantry are going to attempt to withdraw, try to keep some space between them and the French until they get some reinforcements to back them up. So I'll go ahead and finish their move and we'll take a look. So on the Allied left flank, the French right, the French artillery fired first. 2 batteries firing at the line in front of them. They did miss. The gun on the road fired at the cavalry again. They also missed. And the infantry in there went ahead and fired because they missed. The Allies were unable to withdraw. In the center they had a really bad command roll. They were able to move up a little bit here on this flank, but just a little bit. The Brunswick cavalry moved up. They're going to try to join in with the cavalry, although they need a leader to make them a division. And then over here, the Brunswickers got a good roll, and they were able to move up into the Bossau Wood. So they're actually moving up into a position where they'll be able to support. And finally, the 3rd Division got a decent roll and came on the road, although its movement was blocked by the end of the Brunswickers, so that slowed them down a little bit. All right. So there was no casualties, some combat, but no casualties here, so that pretty much ends this turn. So we'll go ahead and get set up for the next turn. Alright, so we're starting the 8th turn of the game, which is a 6 p.m. turn. The French won the initiative. They're now very aware that they're pretty heavily outnumbered, plus their army's taken some hits. They've lost some cavalry especially. A couple of infantry units have been eliminated or badly battered. So they've decided they're going to go over on the defensive. They're going to leave some light infantry supported by a brigade in the woods to hold it as a defensive location, but they're going to try to move some troops over toward the center to try to close off the center completely, give themselves a line there. Over on the right, they're going to continue their sidle onto the road if they can, and then they're going to have their cavalry going to go ahead and move forward and anchor the left flank of their line over on the eastern, on their right flank, the left flank of their right flank, basically. So I'll go ahead and make the moves, and we'll take a look at it. All right, here's the position after the French movement. On their right flank, they were able to sidestep again. Now they have troops across the Linney Road. Their batteries were able to move over into a supporting position. They decided to bring their cavalry up beside the pond, where it's in position where it can threaten the flank of the British division that's moving forward if it advances incautiously. Over on the left flank, as I mentioned, they left a brigade of infantry, light infantry skirmished in the woods, backed up by another brigade to provide a strong point and protect their left flank. And they were also able to come out of square because the cavalry had withdrawn a little bit, and they were able to form a new, or start forming a new center consisting of 2 or 3 brigades of line infantry and a battery. The Guard cavalry remains as a potential charge factor if they need it, but that's what it looks like. There's only a little bit of combat that's going to go on. We'll go ahead and take a look at that here right now. Alright, so the Allies get to fire first during the defensive fire phase. Their artillery battery fires at this brigade deployed in line right here, but they do miss. Over here, they fire at the light infantry, French light infantry that's deployed in the woods. They miss there as well. On the return fire, the French over here, they have 2 batteries firing. Their closest target now is this line infantry brigade. They're successful. They do inflict a casualty, and it survives its morale test. And then over in the woods, their light infantry fires and misses. Finally, their gun fires at long range at the cav and inflicts a second casualty on the other brigade. Alright, so that's all the combat here. We're going into the next turn. Alright, so it's the Allied segment of the 6 o'clock turn. They do have another reinforcing division coming on. It's the Guards Brigade, so it's going to come on off of the West Road. They are going to try to advance their left flank, which is a brigade or division that's been on the board for a long time but hasn't seen a lot of action, so they're going to try to advance there. They need to be able to push the French off the road to get a complete victory here. They're going to go ahead and advance their last turn's reinforcing division as fast as they can because, again, they need to be able to get up to where they can reinforce and clear the road. And they're going to continue to advance the Brunswickers into the woods. They're going to see if they can get the Nassau unit out. It hasn't taken a lot of casualties yet, and it's not getting hurt real bad, but might as well pull it back if they can. So that's what we've got. I'll go ahead and make the moves and we'll take a look. Alright, here's the position after the Allied movement. The Guard Division got a decent roll, and using the roads they were able to move up pretty well. In front of them, the British 3rd Division got a very good roll, and they're actually up into position where they'll be able to start backing up the 5th Division on the board. The cavalry stayed where they were. The Brunswickers kind of got broken up. They don't have a leader with them, so they had to roll individually. The skirmishers got up there pretty fast. The infantry brigades, they're kind of spread out a little bit. And the Nassau unit wasn't able to withdraw. It rolled badly again, so it's still in position right there. There's only going to be a little bit of firing. We've got the British defensive fire first, of course. So the batteries, the French batteries are going to be firing, and then there's a little bit of fighting in the woods, but that's going to be it. We'll go ahead and do some close-ups here. Alright, so over on the French left flank, they fire first, defensive fire, and their skirmishers inflict another casualty on the Nassau Brigade. The Nassau return fire misses. Over here, the French battery fires defensive fire, firing at the cav again. They miss there. Over here, we've got the 2 French batteries are going to fire again at these guys up here, and they hit, so they do an additional casualty. And the battery here fires at this French line unit, and they do a casualty as well. Everybody's morale test pretty good, except for this brigade, which goes yellow. So it's going to need a yellow marker. I'll go ahead and put that on in a minute. Alright, so that finishes the combat for this round. We're going to go ahead and move into the next turn, I think. Alright, so we're starting the 9th turn, which is the 7 p.m. turn of the game. The French won the initiative. They have 1 charge. They've decided they're going to go ahead and try to drive those pesky Nassau infantry out of the woods, or at least drive them back some to secure their flank a little bit better. So those two brigades are going in on the left flank. The center is pretty much holding position. They're in good shape. They also declared a charge with their cavalry division next to the pond. They're going to go ahead and charge that British line brigade. This will force them into square, which will, or probably force them into square, depends on what they decide to do, which means they will be excellent targets for the artillery. And they're going to withdraw a little bit on the far right flank to give themselves some space between them and the oncoming British division. All right, so I'll go ahead and make the moves. All right, here we are after the French movement. Both charges, the infantry that were trying to charge in the Bassault Woods and the cavalry, both charges fail, although the charge declaration, the fact that the cavalry advanced, did cause the British to go into square, so that was a good thing for them. The right flank was able to withdraw, not very far, but they're back on the river line now. And with that one brigade of line forced into square, it does reduce the amount of troops the British have to bring forward against them right now. So that seemed to work okay. And the fact that so many of the British guns are not in a position to fire has been extremely helpful. So I'll go ahead and get some close-ups, and we'll go on to the next turn. Alright, so the British battery here on the flank, they fire again. They're shooting at the same target. They are successful. They inflict a second hit. And that means the morale of that unit is pretty poor right now. But they roll well and they're able to pass. Over here is disastrous for the British. Having forced that brigade into square, and the battery actually being a little bit closer now that it has moved forward, it was 10 points firing, doubled because it's a square is 20. That eliminates the entire unit. It's destroyed. Alright, so that finishes that. We do have a couple of morale tests, panic tests to make, but the Highlanders are fine. The conscripts back here, they don't like seeing their friends get destroyed, and they go ahead and go yellow, even though they haven't taken a casualty this turn, or this game. Over here on the center, we've got the battery firing at the horse again at long range, and they miss. And up here, we've got an exchange of fire between the skirmishers and the Nassau Brigade. Both units are successful and inflict a casualty. That takes the Nassau up to half strength, and a second casualty on the skirmishers. The skirmishers' morale is fine, but Nassau, because they're so badly damaged, they actually fail morale, so they are now yellow status. Alright, so that finishes the combat on this turn. We'll go on to the next. Alright, so this is a quick filler. The last segment showed the combat phase after the French movement for the 7 p.m. turn, which was turn 9. I should have then showed you the Allied response as the second player in turn 9. Unfortunately, I skipped that, probably because I was just getting a little bit tired. The video took 6 hours to film, which was about twice as long as it took to play the actual game. Anyway, on the Allied right flank, the remaining Nassau Infantry Brigade in the Bassault Woods was able to pull back slightly and were reinforced by the lead elements of the Brunswick Corps. In the center, the Brunswick Cavalry, which was just one stand, were able to link up with the Dutch-Belgian Light Horse, which pulled back out of range of the French artillery. The British 3rd Division, which was deployed just to the east of the crossroads on the road, they moved forward and deployed into line behind the British 5th Division, while the British 1st Guards Division moved up the road and took position near the crossroads. There wasn't a lot of combat, mostly just a little bit of artillery fire. I don't think there were any casualties suffered by either side at this point. The Allies are now in position to launch a strong attack on the French forces astride the road to Launay, but needed to win the initiative to make that attack before the French were able to withdraw behind the stream. Unfortunately, for the Allies at least, the French won the initiative. Alright, so we are starting the 7 p.m. turn. The French won the initiative again. At this point, they indicated that they were pulling back on all sectors. So at this point, both players decided to call the game. There's only this turn and one other before nightfall, which is going to end it. The Allies in the Bassa Woods, they don't have enough forces to really drive anybody out on that flank, although it is secure. They're fine in the center, but they don't have enough power to attack. The loss of that brigade on the right flank, or on the French right flank, meant that they really can't push forward into a melee this turn, and it's going to take at least another turn just for that division to come forward and deploy. Remember, it is a British formation, so it has to be in line when it is in combat, and that's going to slow it down. The Guards are still way back there. They're 2 turns away even from being into position to do anything. So we went ahead and called the game here. I'm going to go ahead and put it back on the stand, and then I'll finish up with just a few comments. Alright, so just a couple of quick comments. It was a fun battle. The 2 players who fought it out a couple of weeks ago both enjoyed it. It is done in double scale, which means there's a lot fewer troops on the board. There's actually only about 200 figures total on the entire field, maybe even less than that. And one player was a little bit disappointed because he likes to see lots of troops on the board, which is fine, I understand that. But again, this particular situation was designed to let you fight larger battles with the smaller armies you get in the starter set, and I think it worked just fine for that. The other player had no complaints. He was the British player. Now, what we decided on this was that because the British held the crossroads, but because the French had troops across the road to Ligny, both of them had kind of accomplished their mission. Technically, the crossroads were the objective for the French, but in reality, they just needed to break communications between the British Army and the Prussian Army on the assumption that the British might have wanted to send reinforcements to the Prussians that were getting thrashed at Ligny right now. So we decided in terms of objectives, it pretty much came out as a draw. The casualty rate, too, was fairly even, although it came out a little bit in favor of the French, so we gave the French a minor victory in this one. Some things we noted was that the fields really slowed down the movement of the French, and once they got into the Bassa Woods, it was real easy for those 2 brigades of infantry to just slow them down to a crawl. Historically, they were able to push up further, faster, but in this case, they weren't able to get close enough where they could get any charges, use their mass to drive them out. That slowed them down a great deal. One thing, too, that hurt the French was as the battle went on, their army got more and more spread out. And as it gets spread out, that makes it harder to control, more expensive. So units that should have moved were unable to because they didn't have the command points. Units that should have rallied weren't able to for the same reason. The British had a similar situation going on, but since all of their troops were kind of moving toward the crossroad, it didn't affect them quite as much. And the loss of each side losing one of their lieutenants also played a pretty big role in slowing everything down. So anyway, that's my battle report for the Battle of Quatre. I welcome any comments or suggestions or anything you want to post in the comments. That'd be great. Love to see it. This took a long time. I'm going to have to figure out a way to streamline the process. It took 3 times as long to restage the battle as it did to actually fight the original battle. The original battle done 2 weeks ago was done in about 2.5 hours. So anyway, I'll get this posted. I'm probably going to post it in a couple of separate videos because I don't like really long ones. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.